Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, if we could get seated as quickly as possible. Colleagues, if I could have your attention, please. Welcome to the 27th meeting of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates as we continue our study of Canada Post. A couple quick housekeeping points first, colleagues. As all of you know, we are originally scheduled to meet today from 3:30 to 6:30, but because of votes that were unanticipated at the time this meeting was called, votes will be held at 6 p.m. The bells will start ringing at 5:30. Now, normally it is the practice of all committees to adjourn their committee proceedings immediately upon bells. However, since we have a number of organizations who were scheduled to be here for 2 hours, we'll be shortchanging them for approximately an hour. If the committee wishes, and I take the advice of the committee, since we're only a few steps down from the House of Commons, would the committee agree to wait until 5:45 until we adjourn? I know it's only an extra 15 minutes, but at least it gives our colleagues who have been here to present in anticipation of a 2-hour session an extra 15 minutes. Do I have the concurrence of the committee to allow us to adjourn at 5:45 instead of 5:30? Yes. Thank you very much. With that, then, we'll commence immediately. Our first set of witnesses, Mr. Chopra, thank you once again for being here. I understand you've got a brief opening statement, and then we'll go directly into questions and answers and get this proceeding started as quickly as possible. Mr. Chopra, over to you, please.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the members of the committee for inviting us today. I have with me on my right our Chief Financial Officer, Wayne Cheeseman, and on my left, Madam Susan Bargalis. She's our Vice President of Government Relations and Policy. I have a few remarks and then we'll open it up for questions. I want to thank the Independent Task Force for its thoughtful report. The members of the task force clearly understand the significance of this national institution. They base their analysis and options on a solid understanding of the size, scope, and complexities of the postal system and its importance to Canadians. They have provided Canadians and this committee with a report that is comprehensive, well-researched, and thoughtful. It is a frank report in its assessment and bold in its analysis. The task force has also provided us with indisputable facts upon which any discussion on the future of the postal system should be based. First, the report has left no doubt that there is an urgent need to transform the business. With every passing year, there is less mail to deliver and more addresses for us to deliver to. Second, Canadians like their postal service, and they want it to remain strong, but not subsidized with their tax dollars. Third, parcels are the future of the company because that's the service Canadians want and need. Mail will always be important to Canadians, but they are using Canada Post more to deliver the items they buy online. We're growing our parcel business because we're not only delivering more and more products from Canadian and global companies, we're also opening global markets for Canadian businesses. The benefits go far beyond Canada Post. Fourth, there are no easy solutions. But the good news is Canadians clearly understand that. They understand that the postal system needs to change, and they aren't afraid of what's required to do it. They know mail isn't coming back, but they don't want the postal system to disappear. In fact, they want to know that this important institution is secure for generations to come. That makes the work of this committee incredibly important, not just to the future of postal system, but for the Canadian economy. As Chief Executive Officer of Canada Post, I understand the tremendous responsibility that has been placed on this committee, on the government, as well as on all of us charged with leading this organization. We must get this right. This is about much more than mail and parcels or even a nostalgic attachment to a 250-year-old institution. It's about people's livelihoods and their dependence on a strong and vibrant national postal system. There are 50,000 people who work at Canada Post with families, mortgages, commitments that depend on the company they helped build. They want to see Canada Post evolve and grow as well. On a larger scale are the countless Canadians whose livelihoods depend on a strong and reliable postal system. Canadian small businesses still regularly use the mail to conduct their operations. Checks, invoices, statements, and special customer offers. They send and receive these envelopes every day. Our direct mail business is also incredibly important to Canadians, which is why it still generates $1.2 billion in revenues. It helps small businesses reach their customers in their local neighborhoods. Direct mail is used extensively and successfully by charities to raise much-needed funds. It is also widely used at all levels of government to communicate information to their citizens. In our parcel business, the dependence on a postal system is becoming even stronger. Our parcel volumes are growing because the Canadian retail industry is going through a huge disruptive change as Canadians do more and more of their shopping online. The Canadian retail industry is a significant contributor to the Canadian economy. According to the Retail Council of Canada, total Canadian retail sales in 2015 were roughly $516 billion. We're doing everything we can to help Canadian retailers, large and small, in our biggest cities, in our smallest communities, including the North, to evolve, prosper, and grow. But they need a strong and vibrant postal system to do it. We deliver 2 out of 3 parcels Canadians order online. We are deeply embedded in the new Canadian retail economy. We work closely with Canadians who have risked it all to start a small business, often out of their garage. Their investors are their friends and relatives who pitch in because they believe so strongly in what they're doing. We do more than deliver the parcels they pack themselves. We help them to innovate and grow. After all, more successful they are, the more successful we are. As they grow, we help them transition beyond the startup phase so they can focus on hiring more people and expanding. We have helped some owner-operated small startups become multi-million-dollar enterprises with large staff and strong future. As well, you can name virtually any large retailer in Canada, and chances are we are working with them to help them adapt to the changing face of retail. Many Canadians depend on these large retail companies making a successful transition into e-commerce. I know firsthand that change isn't easy, but the task force has reaffirmed the path that we were taking and was moving us in the right direction. They have also detailed the challenges that are driving the need for change at Canada Post. Over the past decade, mail volumes have declined 32%, or 1.6 billion pieces. That's almost $1 billion in revenues. This is a trend that will continue. We must embrace change and keep going. The report clearly shows that Canadians support making the changes necessary to secure the future of postal service. They also expect the Postal Service to evolve, learn, adapt, and improve, not just in the way we serve them, but in the way we implement change. At Canada Post, that is also what we expect of ourselves. Much has been said about the changes we were making to secure the future of postal service over the last 3 years. Less well known is how we were able to learn, adapt, to improve our approach and processes as we progressed. That's why we are pleased to see customer satisfaction numbers in the task force report remaining as high as 91%. The focus on constant improvement will continue at Canada Post. I would like to conclude by saying to all of the committee members, our challenges are large. The solutions to them must match the enormity and the size of the challenges. There are some people that will tell you that the postal system should never change and remain in the good old days. That is not an option. There is simply too much at stake. I would encourage you to move forward knowing what the task force found, that there are many Canadians counting on all of us to get this right and secure a strong future for Canada's postal system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And colleagues, I would just ask that we will go into our regular rounds, of course, of questions. I would encourage all of you to try and keep your questions and answers as succinct as possible. I will be very strict today to make sure that the 7-minute and 5-minute deadlines are adhered to. I would also like to be able to conclude this session at approximately 4:25. Yeah. 4:25, about 5 minutes early. It always takes a couple of minutes to transition from one group of witnesses to another, since we're actually going to be, unfortunately, giving less time to the organizations who are here at 4:30. I'd like to be able to get them to the table as quickly as possible, so I hope I have your agreement on that. We will start now with a 7-minute round of questions. The first intervener is Ms. Ratanzi.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chopra, for your opening remarks. We all want Canada Post to succeed, and we know that change is necessary, and change is a challenge. And talking to one of the task force members, he indicated that change was not brought about properly, just as for the record only, and therefore change needs inclusion. And hopefully going forward, Canada Post, whatever it takes as a change management tool, will be more inclusive and more open and transparent. My question is, do you see Canada Post as a business or a service or a combination of both? Not a long answer, a very short answer.
Canada Post has always been both. It has components of its business that compete vigorously in the marketplace, like our parcels business or our marketing mail business, and it has the traditional exclusive privilege of delivering mail, which unfortunately is less and less in our system. And we have always tried to strike this delicate balance between making sure that we can be financially self-sustaining and still meet the dual role of a business as well as a service that the Canadians need and cherish.
So then you had, before this process began, and we're going to be on the hustings starting Monday. So before that, you had created your 5-point plan, and I asked the task force yesterday, and they say that the 5-point plan is a first step, but it is not totally comprehensive, and it's not all-inclusive, and it has a lot of things to do. So it says, even with an optimal implementation of the foregoing options, Canada Post will not be positioned to operate in the future on a financially self-sustaining basis over the long term. How do we then move forward? Have you, as the CEO and your team of managers, thought of strategic directions that you might wish to share with us?
I think much of that discussion we shared with the task force, and their report has very thoughtfully articulated the summarization of the complexity of the business challenges we face and some of the options that they have laid out in the discussion paper. The challenges, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, are really large. And the one thing that we all agree is that doing nothing is not an option. So if the goal is to address long-term sustainability challenges, then the medium-term challenges have to be addressed first. I think the spirit of the report, as we see it, is grounded in the fact that some of the changes have to be done immediately, so that down the road, if those prove to be insufficient, that more thoughtful ideas can be explored. We believe that Canada Post needs to address some of its structural challenges. We have been delivering mail for 250 years, and last 40 years particularly.
Sorry to stop you, but what sort of structural changes are you talking about?
We have been at it for quite some time.
Yeah.
Over the last 5 years, Canada Post has embarked on lots of changes. So the spirit of those changes is twofold. Almost half of our focus is on growing revenues. So for example, our parcel business has grown over the last 5 years by over $400 million. As I mentioned, 1.6 billion mail pieces disappearing over the last decade. On average, that accounts for $1 billion of revenue lost. So half of that we have been able to recover through growing our parcels business. The other half we've been able to do through some of the transformation work that we undertook over the last 5 years. That's also account for roughly $400 million. So we have managed to balance those competing needs so far. But given that now the committee has the task of looking at the options, talking to Canadians, we really now look forward to your recommendations and the decision on the next phase of Canada Post's mandate. As you very rightly said, is it a business? Is it a public service? Should it be financially self-sustaining? All of those questions are rightly being discussed and debated at the right forum.
Okay, so we are a committee. You are the CEO. We can work together, but as a CEO and management, I think we are looking to you to at least give us some strategic ideas. And of the 6 options that the task force proposed, I'm sure you know, at mitigating the losses, which would be the easiest or the fastest to implement?
I think at this stage, what our view is that all of these options, for us to be able to look at one option or 2 options in isolation is not the right way of approaching it. I think a package that balances the financial self-sustainability goal, once the committee has had a chance to recommend that, then we can give you our assessment on the ease or difficulty of implementation. I think it would be premature for us to assess the outcome of the committee's preferences.
No, but the committee is going because of what happened with, people perceiving that there was no consultation and that they were suddenly told that their mail was not going to be delivered, whether true or false. That's not our reality. But I think it is important for us to understand that there's the CEO of this large crown corporation, and where the buck stops there, we need to know how you will help us understand, because you are there. Day to day is your operation. Ours is basically consultation. So we will get the input, but we also need to know that you have some strategic plan in place or a strategy that you think through, because you earn the big bucks.
We believe that Canada Post...
Please, Mr. Chopra, very quickly.
Canada Post has to do a 2-pronged approach: grow its business as we are growing in our parcels and logistics, and also address the structural misalignment of the costs that were built for a different generation. It's a combination.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Mr. Blaney for 7 minutes, please.
Mr. Chopra, we saw the Liberal government interfere with the operations of an independent Crown corporation when they shamefully sent a public letter demanding your resignation. We saw them suspend the 5-point plan without first consulting your corporation, Canada Post, about the implication. And now today they ask, what should we do? Well, in fact, Minister Judy Foote even stated she didn't even know what was in the 5-point plan outside of community bailed boxes. Well, the 5-point plan was the first major step Canada Post has undertaken to face this huge challenge you are facing, which is basically, I would argue, bankruptcy. So my question for you this afternoon is, what did this interference, the suspension of the 5-point plan, is costing Canadian taxpayers?
I think with regard to the reviews of Canada Post has been reviewed, its mandate has been reviewed almost every 5-10 years. And we see this process as another process that from time to time the governments undertake to make sure that the mandate for the corporation is aligned with the changing needs of Canadians. So for us, this is a healthy process where we need to understand how and when we can execute, what priorities, what set of options. So this is a process we need to
Yes.
get clarity in order for us to carry on with our
Yes, thank you,
transformation.
Mr. Chopra. My question is fairly simple. How much have we saved so far, and how much are we leaving on the table? How much is costing the abandon of the 5-point plans? Could you share this information
our
with us?
five-point plan was designed to save between $700 and $900 million. At the time of its suspension, we were halfway on its plan. We had saved almost $400 million, and the rest of the savings are now on hold pending this conversation.
Okay, so I understand that there's $500 million, $500 million, that the suspension of the 5-point plans is costing Canadian taxpayer. But this is just, I would say, la pointe de l'iceberg, the helm of the iceberg, or something like that. Well, we had yesterday a very good report that has been produced by the task force that has been put in charge of coming up with solution. One thing I find really insightful yesterday as we have a conversation is the fact that Canada Post, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You have many different clientele in many parts of the country, and what is interesting is those people are happy even though the service is not provided in the same way. So that's constructive. What is another challenge, and I'd like to hear from you, is we know that there's less mail, and this is the revenue are going down. We thought that the parcel was the good news, but what we hear, and I'd like to hear you, is the parcel, people want it every day, while they'll be ready to have mail not every day. And we know that in the parcel sector, there are competitors. So why have you taken this challenge, Mr. Chopra, to do your best for Canadian taxpayer by embarking on this journey with Canada Post? And what I would say, how can you reconcile the fact that parcel, which is generating revenue, has to be delivered on a daily basis, which is costly, your costs are higher than the private sector, and still you have this protocol?
I think the mail has changed its shape and size over many, many decades, from postcards to letters to parcels to packets and so on. And what we're finding now is that it's going through the same change again with parcels growing. And the challenge is not that parcels are growing. In fact, that's the best thing that we have seen for our corporation. The challenge is that we have to transition a mail-centric network that was designed to deliver mail to adapt so that it can deliver mail and parcels. And you raise a very interesting point about every day versus parcels being delivered every day. Our expectation is, in fact, not even next day, it's on same day for parcels. And for mail, there is this assumption that it's okay to get a couple of days. I think from a receiver's perspective, it continues to be the view that Canada Post only delivers mail. And that's our heritage, and that's very common myth that what comes in the mail is only letters. But part of our challenge is also to educate Canadians that what's coming in the mail has also changed, and with that, we can change the way we deliver, change the way we can support our retail network, change the way we can support our support structure. So we think that if we can address some of the legacy structural issues, which is what you're commenting about, the cost differentials with competitive sector, through this transformation, we believe we can compete in the parcel sector, which we're already competing. It's a $1.6 billion business.
Yeah. Okay, let me get to the human resource. Yesterday we learned that a large portion of your workforce is potentially retiring within the next 5 years. Can you comment a little bit on this workforce that need to be treated, I would say, in all respect, but also regarding your needs? And is there a possible match of, let's say, attrition? I'd like to hear you about that, and what are your views on this?
One of our guiding principles on the transformation that we embarked on was that we will work with the workforce within the framework of our collective agreements and also within the framework of the retirements that are coming up, attrition that's coming up in our profile. Our average age for employees is 49 years. And in the next 5 years, if the past retirement patterns continue, we expect over 16,000 employees to retire. So when we were transitioning the mode of delivery from door-to-door to community mailboxes, the changes in the workforce were all dealt with through attrition. So we're very mindful that it's an important institution. It has 50,000 employees who count on the livelihood. These are important middle-class jobs. But in order for it to have long-term future, in order for it to have the sustainability for those jobs, it has to evolve.
Thank you.
And that is the change that is essential.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mademoiselle Trudel, 7 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Alors, je vais procéder. I would like to table a notice of motion, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I would like to table a notice of motion that reads as follows, that the committee asked the task force who we drafted the party on Canada Post in the digital ed to send to the OGGO committee all of the testimony, briefs, notes, statistics, witness lists, and expert lists, photocopies, video recordings, and all documents used to produce this report. Thank you very much.
Représentant de Post Canada.
This is the second time that we've had an opportunity to meet you. Thank you very much for coming. Yesterday, we heard from the task force who submitted the report, which you have no doubt consulted. I'd like to know if you agree with all of the data, the numbers that were put forward in the report.
Is based on both our financial projections and task force outside advisors, Ernst & Young, validating them. So a lot of the assumptions, the financial data, we believe is materially and directionally in line with our projections.
Thank you. As we gathered yesterday, we do understand the challenges facing Canada Post. They talked about increasing revenues by getting into postal or banking services. I would like to know if you have given a copy of the Canada Post study done. Did you hand that over to the task force? And here I refer to the banking services.
Has in any of its areas of research, we shared that with the task force, and task force has done its own assessments, its own independent work to come to the conclusions that they have noted in their report.
But the working document, the study that was done by Canada Post, were they able to consult the study? And when I asked my question to the task force, the task force were not able to answer the question. So I'd like to know whether, in fact, the study that was undertaken by Canada Post was, in fact, handed over to the task force.
Spend a lot of time on the banking file to answer this question.
Yes, the task force independent experts had access to all of the reports and analysis that we had conducted in 2010 on the banking analysis. Yes.
Et est-ce que vous pensez?
And do you think that having banking services in Canada Post offices would work? This would be another type of services. Do you feel that this would be viable for Canada Post, and then do you think it would help you financially?
We looked at and conducted our review of banking in 2010. And when we looked at it and considered a number of pieces of data, we felt that the risk that was involved in the corporation in terms of getting in banking could not be justified by the potential benefits, if there was any, to carry on with the banking. So we decided to go and focus on our core areas of expertise, including parcels and revitalizing direct marketing.
Alors,
Yesterday, I mentioned in committee that the banks have made $35 billion in profits, so I find it unfortunate that you're not able to use this opportunity. The committee, do you think on the Canada Post side, did you look at these 37 avenues that the committee discussed in its report?
Has to play to its strengths. And every organization has core competencies, core strengths. I think Canada Post is a logistics and delivery organization. And we focused on that, and we have demonstrated by growing our parcels business by over $400 million in less than 5 years, that those are the areas which are more successful, and we can have a better outcome for the long-term sustainability of Canada Post. There are financial services that Canada Post already plays in. For example, money transfers. Many communities across the country find that money transfer, especially Canadians who send money back home, find it expensive to transfer money using other sources. So our MoneyGram program is very widely used and is a service that we believe fits into Canada Post's competencies, because over the years, when we had our money order program, which goes back over 100 years in the postal community, it has evolved to a much more efficient digital money transfer system. So here is a product that is something we already do. We also have prepaid debit cards. We distribute those through our branches, and those Canadians who are not able to have a credit card, they're able to purchase a prepaid debit card. So there are services that will make sense in the context of where our core competencies and our capabilities make sense. And then there are services that are well served. And as we saw in the report as well, Canadians are well served by banks and credit unions. And it's not an area where now that an independent panel has had a chance to look at it in depth, not just from a 5-year-old data, which is already stale in the digital economy we live in, with fintech and new technologies, and the banks facing new types of challenges, regulatory, technology investments. These are large decisions. And that is why I mentioned earlier on that we look to this committee to debate, to reflect on the discussion paper, and listen to Canadians.
Thank you very much.
And if that's an option, that's better belongs in the committees.
Thank you. Mr. Whalen, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for coming. Clearly, I think we'd agree that the brand of Canada Post is strong and it's paramount. It allows it to attract its customers for its delivery and logistics business. And without the trust of Canadians, that business would not exist. People would not trust Canada Post to do the delivery and logistics it does without it. And when we look at what has happened over the course of maybe the last 2 years, there seems, at least from my perspective, a whittling of that trust, in that there was a 5-point plan that was put to Canadians, imposed upon them, and it lacked public support. There was a great deal of consternation, certainly during the election. And then again this summer, both on the corporate and the union side, the disagreements over labour put a lot of mistrust in Canadians' hearts about whether or not they should continue to rely on Canada Post to meet their payroll needs, their banking needs, their checking needs, their delivery needs, and moved to alternate sources of delivery, or simply decided to transfer more of their business, perhaps prematurely, to electronic methods. And so there's a certain amount of concern, but I want to focus on just a little more of the financials here to try to get a sense of what opportunities that might not have been canvassed by the task force might be available. So when we look at their report, they say there's $400 million potential savings. That already includes $80 million that have already been captured from the community mailbox. We have converting 80 of the highest volume corporate post offices to franchises for $177 million. It seems that those two ideas seem to be fairly independent. Would you agree that both of those things could be implemented independently, and those savings would not have so much of an overlap in terms of the benefits to Canada Post?
Well, this is, as I mentioned earlier on, this is a task force work, we obviously will need to, once we understand what the complete package of transformation looks like, we will have to then assess the overlap implementation, or for that matter, any cross areas where savings may overlap or not. So I think it's important that we understand at the end the
Yes, sorry,
complete package.
Mr. Chopra, would you agree that at least with community mailbox conversion and the franchising of the outlets, that there's not a huge amount of overlap in your operations in those two ideas?
That is a fair statement.
Okay, fair enough. And then in terms of alternate day delivery, that seems to be something that would have a greater impact with respect to current door-to-door delivery, so those savings would not be entirely realized if we moved to community mailbox conversion? It's a fair statement.
I think those savings are the most difficult for us right now to assess, because if you're not delivering a product every day, do you risk of people not using it? Particularly when you look at our marketing mail business, $1.2 billion marketing mail business. If you are having a sale on the weekend at your store, you want your marketing message to be in the mailbox by Thursday or Friday. And all of those implications for small businesses or large retailers are very important. So it is an area of complex understanding, not just from the mailer's perspective, but from operational perspective. If we deliver parcels every day and mail, and that's a separation of streams, that will add more operational complexity. So this is an area that needs a lot more work.
Fair enough. And this is what we're trying to elicit, is how much of these savings could be implemented all as one package, and what the effects would be. And it's obvious difficult. It's a difficult issue. If we look at implementing the first two, we still have about a $123 million shortfall, if you look at what the report is talking about. And then we say, are there other areas? I was quite surprised to learn yesterday that the back end and management and executive cost of Canada Post were so high at $650 million. And so I'm wondering whether or not the corporation has examined saving money and how much it could save by streamlining management side labor costs.
So management is less than 5% of our workforce, and the, call it senior management, is less than 1% of our workforce. In terms of the cost of that, in fact, the $650 million number that you have, it includes overhead and other items. The number is in the range of $200 million. So it is
yes,
not.
But presumably, if you reduce your management headcount, you could also reduce your floor space, the back end costs associated with that.
And just to put that in context, our management headcount is down by 20% since 2008. For last 30 months, there has been a wage freeze. There's been no pay increases. We have implemented defined contribution pension plan for the management. So the management headcount continues to reflect, in many cases, more than any other attrition. So if we have unionized attrition,
yes.
management is.
So since 2008, you've achieved 20% savings. Do you think you could go an extra 17% to get that $100 million more that we need?
It is a direct correlation to the size of the workforce. So if we are able to implement plans that will allow us attrition, so obviously span of control, management oversight can be reduced in proportion.
Okay.
So that would be a proportionate question.
In terms of corporate structure, at some levels it's fairly simple. At other levels it's a little more difficult to understand. Can you tell us who owns the other 9% of Purolator Holdings Limited?
Purolator's minority shareholder is Kelowna Flightcraft.
Okay, and they were previously involved in the corporation before Canada Post acquired its 91%?
They have not been. They are completely involved with Purolator, not with Canada Post.
Right, but were they a prior shareholder of Purolator before Canada Post acquired its stake?
I can get the facts for you. This is a very old relationship. We can get facts for you.
Okay. In terms of, yes, I'm just wondering what type of, ethical controls are in place to ensure that Canada Post doesn't overly profit the private lines of business at Purolator Holdings, SCI, and Innova Post, to make sure that they're not diverting profits to those entities which are shared with private corporations rather than retaining them within Canada Post in those lines of business where Canada Post competes with its subsidiaries.
Canada Post.
I'm going to have to cut you off with that, but I will ask if you can please supply that answer to the committee in written form so we can get on to our next intervener, which is Mr. McCauley, for 5 minutes, please.
Right, welcome back. The 5-point plan, which was implemented for a while before it got suspended after the election, what lessons did you learn? What lessons did Canada Post learn from the implementation of the 5-point plan?
Any large-scale project that has $700 to $900 million in savings, that impacts a national infrastructure, that impacts millions of Canadians, is going to have some bumps along the way. It is just the size and complexity of it. So I think one of the things we have learned in that process is in the early stages, we needed to get our experience on where to locate boxes, how do we do the accommodation, how do we consult with Canadians. And as we implemented along the way, we have learned better and more best practices on how to engage Canadians. We had almost 1 million surveys, and 450,000 Canadians responded to those surveys with regard to locations, with regard to
well, this was an issue that came up yesterday, that the need to engage more with the municipalities.
In fact,
so that's nice to hear.
In fact, almost 25% of the locations of the boxes were moved to the preferred locations of the communities. So I think this has been a learning journey which allowed us to achieve savings. And what we were really heartened to see is the satisfaction level. Regardless of delivery, mode of delivery, door-to-door, community mailboxes. In fact, community mailboxes, we're talking 86%,
Perfect. So I'm going to interrupt here
91%.
because we're short. I only get 5 minutes, so we're short on time. I'm like the Canadian dollar. I get like 35% off my timing. We also heard last night from the report that the 5-point plan was a great start, but it wasn't enough. The task force was very clear, it's just not enough. What else is needed, to get the job done?
I think the first step would be to start. I think that's very important that we start
again,
somewhere, and then you can evolve. We're living in a world where things are evolving and changing at a much faster rate. Companies used to last 100 years. Now the average lifespan on Dow Jones is 30 years. Products used to last 10 years. Now people change their smartphones every year. So we're living in a world that's rapidly changing. And that is why I think we have to build a flexible infrastructure, a nimble organization that can react to the changing realities of the marketplace. We think parcels is a great story, but it is a competitive marketplace. Yeah. We need the flexibility and the nimbleness in our ability to react to marketplace as things change. So I think what needs to happen is we move forward with a set of transformation agenda and allow flexibility so that we can adapt to changing marketplace.
Okay. I'm almost out of time. I'll ask just very quickly. We heard a lot about difficulty for disabled people getting to mailboxes. Can you tell us, I know there is a program, can you tell us what the program is for those who are not physically able to get to a community mailbox? We have about 45 seconds, so
In fact, my colleague led that program personally. I'll ask her to elaborate on that.
Sure.
You now have 35 seconds.
Okay, so in 35 seconds,
Okay.
every person who was being converted received a number of communications that had a toll-free number that they could call. We had a specially trained team at the end of that phone line able to deal with every individual case in terms of what they would need, whether it was moving from a higher to a lower box, whether they needed a key turner because they had dexterity issues, or whether they really couldn't get to the box. And in those cases, we did arrange to have mail 5 days a week delivered to their CMB, their community mailbox, but once a week it was taken to their door. So we still have that program in place. It's served us very well. We're offering that to people even if they still have, if they've had community mailboxes for many years and something happens that changes in their lives, they have an accident,
So
they
you will
fall.
deliver still once a week?
Exactly. Or even seasonally, if it's the winter, ice and snow that's a challenge, we will do that for all
Maybe
Canadians.
you just need to communicate it a bit stronger.
Yeah, probably earlier and stronger. I think we focused on the people who were being converted, so other Canadians who cared about those people didn't necessarily know
Well,
about it, but that's one of the lessons we
It came up as a very
learned.
serious concern from everyone, so it's nice that you've got the plan. It just sounds like, we need to engage people and communicate that more clearly, that it's available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, this would be our last intervention, 5-minute intervention. I will then excuse our witnesses and reset the table with our new witnesses before us. I'm not sure exactly from the government side who will be taking this 5-minute round. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming back here. At the outset, I'd like to be clear with my colleagues opposite. We've inherited a problem. You're with us because there's a crisis. So we're trying to resolve the problems. We're trying to resolve the problems of trust and communication. Everybody wants, has a lot of goodwill to keep Canada Post. We want to keep Canada Post healthy, but we have to improve the way we communicate, the way we do things. We got this independent task force report this summer, and it's been very educational, but there's a lot of work that remains to be done in the terms of communication. What communication efforts have you been done internally in Canada Post to explain this 5-point plan that you have implemented?
Is earlier also by Mr. Whalen that there is an issue of trust. And when you look at the satisfaction numbers that the task force did in their polling, with over 90% very satisfied or highly satisfied Canadians, I think we take that to heart in more than one ways. While there were difficult changes that had to be implemented, while we had to communicate both with Canadians as well as with our employees, and I'll come back to your specific question on employees, that we are a learning organization. First wave of that change, we learned from our mistakes. Second wave, we got better. Third wave, we got better. And we would not have gotten the satisfaction numbers from Canadians, regardless of mode of delivery, including those that were converted in the last year, in over 86%. So I think this is a data point. It is not be all and end all, but it's an important data point that illustrates that the work we are doing is connecting with Canadians. We are meeting their expectations. With regard to your question on communicating with our own employees, we had a dedicated team that both Madam Margulies and other senior executives led in making sure our employees understood. We knocked on 45,000 doors of people who were going to be impacted because the community mailbox might be on their...
Your employees, Mr. Chopra, what kind of discussion you had with them to inform them of the situation that you need to implement the 5-point plan? Because I think it was kind of urgent to have that plan in place. You know, the faster the plan was in place, maybe you can save a little bit more money to be more efficient, and then deliver, still keeping some kinds of delivery and efficiency of the Canada Post.
I think our employees are always part of the suggestions on improving efficiencies and ideas. In fact, one of our rural carriers invented a device that has saved us a significant amount of money in the rural delivery. We have employees that are constantly giving us ideas. So I think employees are always part of our communication, not just that we have a challenge and we need to change, but also on an ongoing basis with suggestions on efficiencies. So they're very much part of that journey. And we have regular communication through our publications. And they also, our employees have a very high engagement to what we do every day. They deliver the parcels, they connect with Canadians, they understand that.
I'm going to hand on the last minute maybe to my colleague Yves, if you want to.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming here today. My question is for Mr. Chopra. Sir, you are CEO of Canada Post Corporation. Let me tell you that many citizens that I represent here in Ottawa have told me about the security problems they've had with respect to the community mailboxes. They've talked about this during public consultations, and many had called my office directly. aside from the cutbacks and the community postal boxes, what type of security or safety evaluation was done with respect to the location of these community postal boxes? And have citizens been consulted adequately with respect to this whole process?
Community mailbox rollout program, because if we don't locate them in the safest location, we have guidelines that have been in place for over 30 years, from distance from intersections, sidewalks, lighting, all the criteria in consultation with the municipalities for over the last 3 decades. So security and safety of mail and also mail users has always been an important part. But we also have a very rigorous customer service process. If there is a concern, Canadians can call our 1-800 number, which is always on the box. And our security department is always looking at the enhancements that they can do. We have been doing this mode of delivery now for well over 30 years. And the criminals that will do other criminal things, they look at this no differently. But we always look at the criteria that has been well established, well used, and if there are any constituents in your area that have a concern, I think they can call us directly and we can address those concerns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chopra. We will adjourn this portion of the meeting for now. Mr. Chopra, on behalf of the committee, thank you and your colleagues for being here.
Thank you.
And as you've stated earlier in your comments, sir, there's 50,000 employees at Canada Post. We're counting on you and your officials to do whatever you can to keep Canada Post as viable as we have known it for the last 100 plus years. Thank you. You're excused. We will ask our staff to please reset the table and ask all of those in the audience who are coming forward to the table as witnesses to please do so as quickly as possible, and we'll get you started as quickly as possible. Thank you again. This room anytime.
Citizen.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks to our staff for getting the tables reset as quickly as you have. This will be our second set of witnesses. We have 5 organizations before us. I just had a chance to briefly discuss some of the procedures with some of the witnesses. Again, my apologies for the truncated version of this. Because of votes, we're down to about 75 minutes rather than the full 2 hours. Each of you have opening statements. I understand that. Normally it would be 10-minute opening statements per, but because of the truncated version, if you could keep them to about 5 minutes per opening statement, I would appreciate it. I'll give you some latitude, obviously, because you're going to have to condense what you were originally going to say, but obviously the longer you speak, the less time there is for questions amongst the members. So I'll let you try and police yourself there, but I do know many of our members have questions that would like to pose to you. My understanding as well is that the speaking order will begin, I believe, with Madame Macaulay. Is that correct? Please, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. The issues that we are addressing are, by the admission of the President of Canada Post, a lifeline to rural Canada. While we understand the constraints imposed by the business of the House, we will have some difficulty doing justice to the needs of rural Canada in the 5 minutes that remain. We will attempt to do so, but would be happy to address any questions you will certainly have once there are fewer time pressures. Our full submissions have been filed with the committee. The Canadian Postmasters and Assistants Association has been the voice of rural post offices employees since 1902. It is the second largest bargaining unit at Canada Post, representing members in post offices in towns and villages throughout rural Canada. 95% of our members are women. We are in touch with over 6 million rural customers. We were quite taken aback when one of the options the task force presented was converting 800 of our highest volume post offices into privatized franchises. This option would be disrespectful of the current government's directives. It is very worrisome for several reasons. Number one, the committee's mandate from the Canadian electorate is clear. Privatization was not to be considered during the review. Second, what public company would sell off its largest money-making centers to its competitors? Canada Post has made profits for 19 out of the past 21 years. Just last year, it netted almost $100 million in profits. Why would we risk losing this? Third, our steady rural post offices and the communities that rely on them are being abandoned, conducted by Anderson Consulting, found that there was over a 55% chance a franchise would disappear if that post office was replaced. All that was left for those residents was a collection of boxes at the side of the road. That's hardly vibrant Canadian infrastructure. Fourth, according to the task force report, Canadians and businesses of all sizes have a positive perception of Canada Post and its services. The vast majority believe mail is highly important and that Canada will always need postal services owned and operated as a public service. The current government obtained its mandate while promising opportunities for women in this country. Our membership is 95% women. If Canada Post is weakened in rural Canada, there will be very meaningful jobs to which women can turn. In 1994, the Liberal government announced a moratorium on post office closures. Despite the fact that moratorium is still in place, we have seen over 350 rural post offices closed. If the corporation really wanted to keep a post office open, they negotiated the ability to appoint somebody by other means, meaning they can choose whoever they want if there was no available candidate after a competition. The latest example would be in Red Bay, Newfoundland, and Labrador. 7 people failed the interview the corporation had set, including the mayor of the community. The corporation then closed the corporate post office, saying that it had completed the staffing process and couldn't find anyone qualified to work in a post office. It then opened a privatized franchise and gave it to one of the candidates who failed the interview. Canada Post wants to give its operations away, and it doesn't care anymore if people realize how inconsistently it is behaving.
No?
Okay, let me try and wrap it up. Okay. I just want to comment on one thing then. It was mentioned that Canadians are served. They have enough banks. I just wanted to let you know that we did do a study, and we surveyed 3,260 rural communities, and 1,200 of those communities do not have a bank or credit union. Out of the 615 Indigenous communities, there are only 54 communities that have a bank or credit union. That is 9%. That's shameful. In conclusion, we have an opportunity to make the best use of our national public asset. We must ensure we serve the needs of rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. We have to recognize both the needs of these communities and the contribution they already make and can continue to make to Canada's economy and its national fabric. When I started, I referred to Mr. Chopra's comment that Canada Post is a lifeline for rural Canadians. No one familiar with the importance of these operations and who cares about rural Canada would disagree. We are imploring the committee not to cut our lifeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for the rest of our interveners, that intervention was about 6.5 minutes long. I would encourage you to try to keep it to 5 minutes, but to be fair, if you go 6.5, what is good for one should be good for all. Next on my list, I believe, is Monsieur Paradis.
Okay, sure. So thank you to the committee for inviting the Union of Postal Communications employees here today to discuss with you. Mr. West of the Public Service Alliance of Canada will be helping me with some questions you may have, if you have questions. So the UPCE is a component of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. We represent roughly about 1,600 members at Canada Post and 150 members at Purolator. Our members perform administrative, technical, professional, and clerical work, including customer support for businesses and consumers. And they're often the first point of contact for many Canadians who need advice and assistance on their postal services. So my comments today will focus on several aspects of the discussion paper recently released by the task force for the Canada Post Corporation Review. So I don't think it'll come as a surprise that our overall reaction is one of disappointment. We had hoped to see that the task force would take the public interest as its primary guiding principle in the review. While Canada Post may be called a corporation, the owners or shareholders are the people of Canada, and its service to Canadians must be first and foremost. So as stated in the discussion paper, Canada Post has a universal service obligation and a mandate to meet public policy objectives. A program not mentioned by the task force and one that should be restored is the food mail program. The current Nutrition North program has been criticized by both Canadians living in the North and by the Auditor General. Food prices for families have increased drastically and have become unsustainable. In 2005, Canadians voted for change. The task force is just offering more of the same at Canada Post. Cut services, cut jobs, raise prices, repeat. The task force doesn't mention the outsourcing taking place. In 2010, call center jobs began to be outsourced to large multinational corporations based in India. While these jobs are still in Canada, there is no guarantee these jobs will remain here. Instead of investing in good-paying jobs, Canada Post would rather pay multinational companies that are usually based outside of Canada. All this does is create jobs that are of lesser value locally, are precarious at best, and now pay a significantly lower wage. Outsourcing not only sends profits offshore, it does so at the expense of the stability and the quality of the jobs. The task force acknowledges that Canadians living in rural locations have expressed real concerns about the effects the closure of their post office would have on their communities. Their response to the concerns is to either close all of Canada Post's remaining outlets, including those in urban areas, or to convert them into franchises. To realize at least half of the suggested savings, Canada Post would have to convert the 800 highest yielding offices, in other words, skim the cream from the public entity. While promoting franchises, the discussion paper doesn't mention the nature of the jobs at these outlets. They're not unionized jobs, so of course they don't come with the usual union baggage, living wages, and decent working conditions. We can't help but wonder that this discussion paper is just the beginning of a road that will lead to the eventual privatization of the corporation. The task force doesn't talk about Canada Post's management structure and the executive compensation practices. The multiple levels of approval required in the management structure for even a simple decision are inefficient and costly and have a negative impact on the operations of the business. And despite repeated claims that the corporation is going through difficult times, our understanding is that senior executives continue to receive large personal bonuses while the majority of employees continue to receive minimal salary increases. When we met with the task force, we also suggested that they review the structure of Post and its relationship to the corporation. The discussion paper only mentions that Post is one of the Canada Post group of companies, 98% owned by the corporation. Positions that were originally in Canada Post were moved to Post back in 2002 at its creation. We question the value of such an arrangement. The costs of projects involving Post have acted as a barrier to change and innovation. Meanwhile, Post mirrors Canada Post's expensive top-heavy management model. It alone has 11 vice presidents. We wonder why it has duplicated Canada Post's executive structure and question its value. We believe it would be more cost-effective to return at least a number of Post positions back to Canada Post. And finally, the Canada Post pension plan has been in the news. Among the options in the discussion paper is a permanent exemption from the solvency funding payments required in the PBSA. UPC has already written or asked the government through Minister Foote to provide such an exemption. We believe the solvency funding rules are unnecessary and counterproductive. They were introduced in the 1980s partly to respond to insolvencies of private sector employers. And the plan currently is better than fully funded on a going forward basis. Before ending, I'd like to re-emphasize that we are concerned about the direction taken by the task force. Canada Post isn't just another business. It has a public responsibility. It also has a role to play in providing stable, middle-class employment now and in the future, offering new opportunities for new generations that are better than precarious jobs. So thank you for the opportunity to share some of our views and concerns. And Mr. West and I will be available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paradine. Just for your information, you're about 5.5 minutes, so I appreciate the economy of words. Next, I have on my list Mr. Dubois.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. The Association of Postal Officials of Canada represents about 3,500 people throughout the country, and our operations pertain to the processing and delivery of mail. If we're here today, it's because back in 2013, there was a conference call made to announce that we had a problem. We had a 5-year break, and we had to come up with a solution. Not long afterwards, we had the 5-point action plan that came out, and which became apparent is that the transparency was an issue. If we consider ourselves to be very close to management, since we are responsible for supervision, and transparency could have been better than it was. Mr. Deepak Chopra said that we're part of the solution. Unfortunately, I think we really missed a good opportunity to include us at that time. in telling us that we had a problem, they didn't allow us to participate in the decision-making process to find solutions. We received the report from the task force. I seriously hope that the government will make good decisions. If we're part of the solution, I'm expecting that we will be included, and it's clear that the negotiations that take place in Canada Post are problematic. We will support some things, but once again, transparency is tied to the success of an undertaking. And I hope that we're going to have good recommendations that will enable us, the 4 bargaining units involved, to be able to sit down with our employer, come up with solutions, and together find a way out without having things imposed on us. Thank you very much.
Dubois. Our final intervener I have is Mr. Pelisek. Is that, am I pronouncing your name correctly, sir?
Yeah, that's right.
Good. I got lucky. I have a name that gets butchered a lot, so I hate doing it for others. Please, sir, 5 minutes or so.
Thank you. My name is Mike Pelisek. I'm a letter carrier from Vancouver, and I'm the national president of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. And with me, I have on my left Jan Simpson, our first national vice president. And if I can mention for those in the room, we also have our entire national executive board seated in the gallery, so our leadership from across the country. We don't quite have 22 vice presidents like Canada Post, but we have leaders across the country that are here today. So we represent about 48,000 postal workers at Canada Post in 2 major bargaining units. And we've been actively involved in the very creation of Canada Post as a Crown corporation, and in fact, every review of Canada Post since then. We built Canada Post, and we have a better understanding of the day-to-day operations than anybody. We, like some of the others here today, were very concerned about the report from the task force. We believe it's a very flawed document. We're concerned that the committee's consultations will be based on this document and therefore tainted. The paper is filled with errors, with misrepresentations, and there are serious omissions as well. And CUPW will be providing to this committee a complete detailed breakdown of that at a later point. But for now, I'd like to just touch on a couple examples of this. The paper predicts the Canada Post will lose money this year, even though all signs point to the contrary. They've had a fantastic first 2 quarters. It also completely omits that in the first 2 quarters of this year, for the first time, the growth of parcels has eclipsed the decline of letter mail. We expect that trend to continue going forward as parcels grow. And as a matter of fact, the German post office has just announced this week that they expect their parcel volumes to double by the year 2025. We expect to see similar things in post offices around the world. It also notes that CUPW and Canada Post recently signed 2 tentative agreements, but fails to mention that one of these agreements includes important changes that Canada Post told us are necessary for the corporation to considerably expand its market share in both parcel delivery and direct mail. The task force paper refers they say that only 7% of supporters of postal banking would use that service. That is factually incorrect and not what their survey said. The survey that they conducted was of the entire public, not just supporters of postal banking. They found that 7% said they would certainly switch to postal banking or use its services. And a further 22% said they would probably switch to the postal banking. I don't think you could find a bank in this country that would not be happy with 29% market share of banking. And yet from this, they tell us that they don't think this is the best option moving forward. We've heard from people across this country that these services are urgently needed, from rural communities, from the urban poor, from all sorts of people. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go into all of our submissions that we've put together today. As you can see, they're hefty, and that can't be done in 5 minutes. But the vast majority of these issues were not actually addressed in the task force report. We've prepared submissions on the financial situation of Canada Post Corporation, and a pattern of deception and misinformation from Canada Post management. Year after year, Canada Post predicts that their revenues and their profits will be substantially less than they are. Year after year. It appears they've done it again this year. It was by about $100 million last year, about $500 million the year before. And we simply have no faith in the predictions and the projections that they have made. We've put together submissions around home delivery and the importance of maintaining it, about how Canada Post can be used to help green the economy and green its own services. These are important issues. This government has made big commitments around climate change, and it needs to use the Crown corporations. It needs to use its assets in order to bridge those gaps and make those commitments. Again, we see nothing on these. So I understand time is short, so I'll leave it there, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank all of you for your economy of words. I truly appreciate it, as do, I'm sure, all members of the committee. We'll go to our 7-minute rounds. First up, we have Mr. Whalen. I would ask all colleagues, if you are going to be sharing your time, if you could please, at the outset of your intervention, let me know how much time you're going to cede to a colleague, so then I can interject at the appropriate moment and make sure your colleague gets his or her spot at the microphone. Mr. Whalen first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be ceding 2 minutes of my time to Mr. Robillard. And again, I also want to thank all of you for coming. It's very difficult in the short time allotted for us to get all of our thoughts out. Please do know that all of your written submissions will certainly be taken into account as we work to prepare the report. And also that I don't think that the committee feels bound by the mandate that was given to the task force. Our mandate is to provide our recommendations on the future of Canada Post. And as was expressed by me yesterday, my personal thought is that the mandate of the committee was, the task force was somewhat circumscribed in that they were only allowed, or they were restricted in looking at the future of Canada Post as a self-sustaining entity. And so, following up on the initial question of my colleague who was here earlier, I'd like to ask each of you, and really please to each of the organizations to answer in one sentence, whether you feel that Canada Post best serves Canadians as an enterprise, as a service, or as a combination of an enterprise or service. And maybe we can just go in the same order in which you started.
Both.
Okay. Mr. Paradis?
I think that public policy objectives are the primary responsibility of Canada Post.
Okay. Mr. Dubois?
I will say both.
Okay. Mr. Palasek?
Yeah, it's a public service, but it's also a source of revenue for the government, and has been consistently.
Okay, well, that's great. So it sounds that we've had the corporation and the unions agree on something today, which is good. And so, you know, when we look at the task force report, my own view was that it did quite a rigorous financial analysis. It involved external parties to review, again, circumscribed. When the task force says that even with an optimal implementation of the options that were presented, Canada Post will not be positioned to operate in the future on a financially self-sustaining basis over the long term. Mr. Palaszczuk, you represent the largest union here at the table, or Ms. Simpson, either of you, could let me know what you feel about that statement in the Canada Post report, and whether or not there's other lines or other ways that they can achieve the savings needed or the revenue needed to become self-sustaining.
Absolutely. They could achieve revenue growth through a whole number of proposals that we've put forward, not just postal banking, by the way, but also broadband services and various services that leverage the existing delivery network of Canada Post. And I think one of the most glaring omissions from the task force report surrounding postal banking was actually the report from Canada Post that was done in 2010, and this was asked about. And I will say for the record that Minister Foote assured us that she would obtain this report, and her staff assured us that it would be public so that we can see this stuff. We haven't got it yet still. Of the 800 pages in that report, over 700 are redacted. And the ones that aren't redacted, well, you can see for yourself. All the information's deleted. But you can look at all of the various headlines that they put where they declare this a win-win situation, a proven diversification strategy. These are the words of Canada Post management. And, of course, finally...
Thank you, Mr. Pausek. I think just off the banking, I'm sure someone else will come back to it. Is there another line of business where you feel the revenue could come from?
Well, if you look around the world, you'll see post offices are doing an awful lot of things. One of the things that we've talked about is a letter carrier program where the letter carrier could check in on seniors who live at home. We have programs like that up and running in France, for example. Around the world, post offices are diversifying. It's only here where they seem to be refusing.
Fair enough.
About 30 seconds, Mr. Whalen, before we go to Mr. Robier.
Sure, Mr. And any of the unions, do any of you have any particular evidence about the revenue that would be generated by postal banking based on any studies that you've commissioned that would provide any solid evidence or foundation for postal banking revenues?
Sorry, repeat that?
Have you commissioned any separate independent studies that provides evidence of what postal banking revenues would be in Canada?
We've commissioned studies about the viability of postal banking in Canada, and they've all come back with glaring success. But I would suggest that if you'd like to see the revenues, you should ask Canada Post management about their 5-year financial projections for postal banking, which they've deleted from the public version of this report.
Mr. Robier, 2 minutes, please.
Merci. Ma question sera...
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Palissac. Canada Post is trying to achieve savings, that we all know. What would you say with respect to the security of your employees during the process of this process? If several thousand people have fears getting their mail from the community postal boxes, what about your colleagues? How are they feeling?
Boxes, and we've engaged quite broadly with the public around this, as I'm sure you're aware. Our members have concerns about it. We have concerns about increase in repetitive strain injuries, for example, if we're required to do the same work over and over, putting things into boxes. There are concerns about the safety of the placement of some of these boxes, and maybe I could take you to some of them. There are some that are downright dangerous.
I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Blaney for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alors, bienvenue à vous tous.
Welcome to all of you, and a special welcome to the people who have accompanied you. I think it's important to remember that you are the responsible for the success of Canada Post. I represent a rural area, and they're very satisfied with the service of Canada Post. I've never have any problems with Canada Post services in my riding, and what really surprised me with the report is that I have a mailbox near my home. I realized that for every Canadian, the service delivery is different for every Canadian, but it seems like right across the board, everybody's happy with the service. There's one point that I really liked in your intervention, and Mr. Dubois, because I'm asking the question in French, you said that you said that really people weren't aware that there was such a problem, and that you wanted, and if you don't know there's a problem, how can you be part of the solution? So my question to you, Mr. Dubois, is, and it really struck me in the report, there's a paragraph that struck me with respect to the governance. On page 10, according to many comments submitted to the task force, the restructuration should be done during a consultative process leading to changes made in governance. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter, and if anybody else wants to talk about the governance structure, please do so.
So, Monsieur, vous voulez commencer?
Ben, écoutez, en 2013,
Back in 2013, I'll go back a bit in time. It's like the guy who cries wolf. The little boy cries wolf, and then he cries wolf so often that you don't hear him. But then finally we did wake up and say, okay, we do have a problem with respect to the pension fund. I had this discussion with the employer. I said, how is it that no managers came and knocked on our doors to say, we have a common problem? It doesn't just apply to the unions. It applies to managers, the directors, all the employees of Canada Post. So, I don't know how things unfolded. It's most unfortunate, but I can say that in the history of Canada Post, it's the first time that the four unions, the four bargaining units, have decided to work together. We've never seen that in the past, and they're now working to. Our common goal is our pension fund. There were financial problems that were not addressed when they should have been done. So finally, at 5 to 12, or 5 to 12 midnight, we decided to take action and react. I don't know if I answered your question, but the fact that the four bargaining units sat down for the first time in Canada, Post Canada's history, I think that says a lot. And that's something that's very dear to our heart.
The governance structure and the relationship and the way, how can we, when there's an issue, how do we work, I would say, together? And Mr. Paradis,
So maybe a number of things, like consultation is a huge problem. I can name at least maybe 4 or 5 examples where the law technically makes it mandatory for an employer to consult with its employees or co-develop certain things. And the way that we've been consulted in the past was that here's essentially the document, here's the plan. We're there to consult, but then they state, well, unfortunately, we can't really move on this because we've already sent it to the board of directors. It's already approved by the board of directors. So really, we're just letting you know of what the plan is, right? And that's considered a consultation. And the issues with that, then, that creates labor relations issues, it creates grievances, it creates legal challenges. What the 5-point action plan is maybe the perfect example of that, where we were in bargaining, and the corporation's position was that they're offering a deal which we really didn't want. They told us essentially that if we didn't bring this to the membership, they would offer a worse deal, so under threat. Right after we agreed to bring that final offer to our membership for a vote, they suddenly come out with the 5-point action plan. They hadn't consulted with anyone prior to that. We filed some unfair labor practice complaints. That was also part of their rationale to say that they would never get a special deal from the government of Canada for the pension plan. Sure enough, right after that happened, with the 5-point action plan, they released the temporary pension solvency relief. So again, we were blindsided by the 5-point action plan. We're blindsided by the pension relief, and I would say that's more than blindsided. Actually, we were misled because we were told that would never happen.
Okay.
So the public message is always that they work with the stakeholders, but my personal experience has been the complete opposite.
Mr. Palexec, we still have 1 minute.
Yeah, I would echo some of the concerns of Francois around consultation with Canada Post. They're required legally to consult with us on a number of things, and also contractually. And as was stated, it's typically done in a meeting where they simply tell us what will happen. And that's not consultation. And at the same time, we're often blindsided by announcements. I believe we were given 11 minutes notice of the announcement of the 5-point plan and the elimination of door-to-door delivery. I thought that was rather inconsiderate. and it certainly isn't conducive to good labor relations.
Okay. I just want to say also, and I mentioned it, I think, to Ms. Simpson, we were happy to know that there was an agreement so that, and I want to say also, and I know there's the trust. We know that when we put a letter in the mailbox, we know it will get there. And I think this is a forgotten asset of Canada Post. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mademoiselle Trudel.
Merci. Alors, j'ai beaucoup. Thank you. I have many questions. I'm going to do this quickly. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for coming here today. My first question is for Mr. Peliksek, and after anyone else could intervene, I'd like to know, you talked about the report. Could you go into greater detail about the elements that are erroneous according to your studies, according to what you had in hand, and what should we find? What should we have found in this report that is not there?
A full list of all of this as we go through it, but simply in the meantime, there's no critique of Canada's banking system, for example, or the banks. There's no analysis of the payday lender problem in this country. In their polling, they didn't ask a basic question. They didn't ask people who live in communities without banks, but with post offices, whether they'd use a postal bank. There's nothing on Canada Post's financial performance in 2016 and the fact that the corporation reported the highest January to June profits since 2010. The task force mentions that Canada Post has an $8.1 billion solvency deficit, but they don't talk about the going concern increase from $1.2 billion to $1.6 billion. And of course, that's averaged over 5 years. The going concern surplus on the pension plan is actually $2.7 billion for last year alone. Their use of information is very selective. The unnamed experts that they quote throughout the document, need to be named. We need to see the analysis of how they actually came up with this stuff. And we need to see the opinion of the experts that gave contrary information, because there were some. And we know that they had experts who they met with that talked about how postal banking could work very well. They didn't mention the study we gave to them that indicates that the value of ad mail decreases with centralized delivery. And decreases in the eyes of the customers. They tend to mention negative information and leave out positive information, and we see this throughout the report. We'll most certainly be providing the committee with these details at a later date, and our members will be engaging with this throughout the country once the committee goes on the road, and you'll have an opportunity to hear from postal workers about all of our submissions in detail.
Would anyone else like to add to what he said about what was erroneous in the task force report?
I guess my biggest thing was when they said that Canadians were serviced just fine with banking, and we know that's not the case. 84% of the communities in Newfoundland do not have a bank or a credit union. They don't talk about what it's like for those rural Canadians to get to those banks. And in one community in Newfoundland and Labrador, in the winter they have to go by Skidoo, which takes 6 hours to get to their bank. In the summer it's a boat, 3-hour boat ride, or a $500 plane. That wasn't addressed. 50% of the communities in Canada, 50% of our stats show that in each province they don't have a bank or credit union. So that was really problematic and erroneous from our perspective, and a great concern, especially with the Indigenous communities not being fully serviced. well, 9% of the communities are being serviced. That's it. And I feel that should be part and parcel for the universal service obligation. Every Canadian should have a right to a bank account. And that certainly is not the case. We talk to folks that are 60 years of age and never had a bank account in their life. So it was unfortunate. I feel the task force committee did not look at our study, because our study was very extensive, and our expert was John Anderson from Anderson Consulting.
So I guess part of the issue, I guess, it's something that will be in a written submission later on, but part of the issue, I think, is the availability of the data as well. I sent in a request right when I received a copy of the task force of the Secretariat for the information, essentially the polling data and the names of the third-party experts that were consulted. And I just received a response, I think, maybe half an hour ago. So it makes it very difficult for us, essentially, to build a real presentation, or for me anyways, and consult meaningfully with actual data, right? So having that data, I think we would have been able to consult in a better way. And it's also concerning to me that when I did receive the response from the Secretariat, they name the primary partner, but they also say we've also dealt with a bunch of other experts, and they don't seem to be naming those experts. The question that I had specifically addressed, especially for postal banking, was that did you seek experts from the from the banking industry? I would personally see that as some form of conflict of interest, and I think you would need to disclose that in the discussion paper, which I didn't, again, see that. I didn't see any form of disclosure. I also don't understand why you can't name the actual experts that you consulted on the paper itself. The polling data can be pretty large, but I don't know why you wouldn't be able to attach that in the paper to name specifically the experts that you consulted. So the paper itself seems to, in a lot of cases, seem to go in one direction, essentially to build justification for an expected result, as opposed to providing what I believe to be an objective or empirical review of the facts, so that any individual can have a real discussion about the options in front of us.
Go to Monsieur Drouin. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Merci beaucoup d'être.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming here today. We appreciate your testimony. I see unions not as part of the solution.
For the rest of the time that I have, and I have read your document on postal banking, and I agree. I come from a rural area. I agree that in some communities, especially in the T communities that I call them, some banks have left. The only thing left is Canada Post, and just one of the comments that I've read: a postal bank can be quickly put in place because it already has the infrastructure, which I agree. Staffing and products and technology. Canada could do this transition fairly quickly, offering a wide range of financial services, and that's where I'm not sure where to. I haven't yet made up my mind on what type of financial services that Canada Post could potentially offer. And I noticed in your report you quoted Scotiabank Executive VP of Retail Distribution, and to paraphrase him, customers do not go into branches much, but when they do ask for advice. And when they start asking for advice, that's where the technicalities come in for training. As you know, as soon as you ask for financial advice, well, you have to be a certified financial planner. There's provincial regulations in place. And how did you plan on that? Like, would you see, for me, if Canada Post would have access to its potential pool of employees which are not trained versus outside employees that are already trained, that are either coming out of college with a CFP certification, or they already have their mutual fund licenses, as I think Algonquin College already offers that. So I'm just wondering, what I don't want is Canada Post or its employees to shoot themselves in the foot when Canada Post could have access to other employees. So how did you envision that?
Currently now, many Canada Post employees at the retail counter, we do passport verification and passport applications, and we attend the government passport training school, for example, in Toronto for a 1-week period of time. We could also attend the banking training sessions that are offered by the banks and other institutions, like you mentioned, Algonquin College and so forth. Mm-hmm. So therefore, any kind of work we do at the retail counter, we are properly trained, and we meet the standards that are required by the law. So I think we can do outside training like we do for passport training. We're also FinTrack trained, which is the highest level of security training that is offered for Canada.
Okay.
I think if you look around the world, you'll see where postal banks have been brought in. This has been dealt with, for example, in Morocco, where they just brought in their postal bank 6 years ago. They established a training center for those retail members to come in and be trained. But at the same time, we also have a part of our collective agreement which allows us to develop these joint projects with management and figure out how that would roll out. But what's needed first as well on both sides to move ahead so that we can figure out the next steps. Canada Post has a very highly trained and educated workforce that have passed security screenings and various things. So we know we can do it. I'm sure we can. It's been done around the world with great success, and we can do it here too.
No, I see a role for, especially in rural Canada, where there's a lack. But again, it goes back to, I know, like in my communities, Caisse Populaire, they're often there. But some of them are leaving because I believe they just don't see a return on investment. And yesterday I said my grandmother, she still needs a place to go in her T community to access banking services and if she wants to take cash out. And I see that, but my grandmother was not going to be here in 20 years. So are we talking about a 20-year cycle, or do you guys see this as a longer-term investment, like a really long 20, 30, 40-year investment for postal banking, or? So right now, like my generation, we don't go to banks. I mean, we rarely step into the banks. I do, even banks right now are calling themselves as fintech companies. Not really, they have institutions, but as you know, as you've reported, they're closing their banks as more and more. So my question is, there's still a market for that, especially for seniors that may not have the necessary skills to go online, and they don't trust online banking, so they'd rather go meet somebody in person. And I see, and I do believe that there is a role to play in rural Canada. But do you believe that there would be a return on investment for 15, 20 years, or 30 years?
Well, that plan would have to be developed, but I think if you look at the postal banking report, which Canada Post still refuses to release, it talks about using a clicks and mortar strategy. So they would leverage both online banking and also their existing retail outlets. So as people's banking habits change, it would be situated to make those changes with them.
Oui.
If I may, I'd go even further. It's just not financial services. Canada Post has the largest retail outlet in the country. I think they could really transform things, particularly in the rural area. Earlier, a question was asked, is Canada Post business or is it a service? It's a bit about the both. I think in the urban sector, it's quite obvious what the role is. But in the rural area, we're always the company of last resort. UPS can't deliver, they rely on us. So the employees are there. So we do have an opportunity to provide services, even financial service. We could have this presence in the rural area. Mr. Dubois, we talk about co-location, particularly in rural areas. Canada Post is in the big communities of 5,000 people and more, but for small companies, people have to go even further to get to this hub. Personally, if you're asking me the question, I think we have a great opportunity to show that we're there for all Canadians. We're there to support them. A trip, a 2-3 hour trip for banking, I don't find that acceptable. We're maybe relatively young now, but that's going to change in time. We'll need more services. Thank you very much. Mr. Blaney, 5. I read the report with a great deal of interest. I met with representatives from the banking world, and the report says the implementation of a postal banking system would be a costly undertaking with limited opportunity for profits and a great deal of investment in infrastructure. So, according to the report, that postal banking is not an interesting option. My question pertains to the challenge. You're really the experts in terms of mail delivery. Canadians are prepared
every 2 days, one every 3 days, maybe even less frequently. But on parcel, it seems like it's important to be delivered. I understand that I think Mr. Chopra used the expression mail-centric. So, like in my experience, the mail and the parcel are delivered at the same time. If we break it down, is it a way to, to modernize, make savings, address to the need of the people? I'd like to hear you on that. Maybe Mr. Palachek.
Yeah, I think it's a solution to a non-problem, to be honest. I mean, if you only get mail 2 days a week, you don't have a letter carrier walking up to your front door with empty mail bags the other 3 days. We have a route measurement system which accounts for fluctuation in mail volumes, and Canada Post is very well situated to adapt to that. And if you look at over the last 10 years, as letter mail has begun to decline, the number of letter carriers has declined by the same percentage. That's already built in. And so if you only get a letter once a week, you only have a letter carrier coming to your door once a week. Some people get mail 5 days a week, and they rely on that. But when you then go and break the delivery model, where they deliver the parcels and letters together, it will become a lot more costly. They can save a lot of money, because what it would mean is you'd have basically 2 people going up the street every day. And in that sense, it makes it more environmentally friendly to deliver. Actually, Canada Post delivers parcels with the lowest carbon footprint in the industry, and they do that precisely because they're able to combine this work and combine efficiencies, and that's on a financial scale, but also on an environmental scale and others.
Okay, anyone else to comment on? But in my case, with the community postal box, nobody come at my door. It goes at the mailbox, and any comment on that? Is there a real, because they say that to deliver the mail 1 day out of 2, and I would be fine with that, or because mainly it's billed, I get $74 billion economy. But is it viable to separate parcel from mail from an operating point of view?
Well, I think there's a methodological inconsistency in the question itself, in the notion that people, if they're getting mail 5 days a week, don't want mail 5 days a week. I think that opinion is very much qualified by the fact that a lot of those people may indeed have postal mailboxes. Do I want to go to my community mailbox 5 days a week in the winter? No, I don't, because I have to buy a lighter and, heat up the key to get into it sometimes. So I don't want to go through that bother. If that mail came 5 days a week, which I get 5 days a week, to my mailbox, do I want it? Yes. Mm-hmm. So I think that the notion that the community mailboxes are there needs to be taken into account when we look at that statistic. Okay. And then going back to what Mike said.
I would say I would have it, 7 days a week if I could. It's just when told, are there ways, because I understand and that we want to find a way, and this is what the report, to seek sustainability. And that's why I'm bringing those, that's why I believe those issues are brought to the table, in my view. Because c'est sûr que dans un monde idéal, j'aimerais ça recevoir le courrier.
Ideal world, I'd like to get mail every day, even on weekends. But is it profitable? Mr. Paradis, what are your thoughts?
I'll give him 2 minutes. C'est bon? Okay. Okay. Well, actually, I want to sort of get off on a positive topic, because we heard yesterday how much Canadians appreciate Canada Post and are satisfied with the current level of service. but I think it's that trust level that they have in visiting their post office, in seeing their delivery person. One of the suggestions, but we know that's not sustainable right now. There's got to be some changes. And one of the suggestions that was provided was to turn the Canada Post offices into community hubs. So what additional services would you propose to make corporate post offices attractive to citizens in rural communities that tend to congregate in these locations? We're thinking of things like, as it is, people go to collect their Revenue Canada paper-based, although that may be disappearing very soon as well. Passports, you mentioned that, social insurance number application, EI, and so on. So what do you see?
So I think we can see a variety of services, and a lot of them would have to be locally developed when we're talking about community hubs. And the reason we put some of this idea forward is that post offices are already real centers in their communities. And so it could be a good opportunity to showcase, for example, the work of local artists or small businesses. There's a variety of things that could be done, but it's mostly just recognizing the role that the post office already plays in a lot of these small towns. And when you have the largest retail network in the country, the options are really wide open as to what could be brought into that retail network.
Can I just ask, and if you don't have the answer, Mr. Palasek, maybe somebody else can interject, have there been any studies as to what other services could be provided?
If I may, si je peux me permettre.
Oui, oui.
If there is another service, we're not aware of it. And I go back to my earlier intervention. The report says that Canadians are in favor of certain actions. So I think that looking for a solution has to be done with the employer. We all have our own little ideas. I've heard them. So we should explore these avenues. It's our duty to sit down, look at the problem together, and see how we could save Canada Post. And secondly, ensure that it will be viable tomorrow and avoid all these negative aspects. Perhaps this won't be an easy task, but I go back to what I said earlier. It would be great to sit down with the employer to say, okay, thank you. Go very quickly. A trust crisis. That's what I see. This comes out in the report. It's most unfortunate. I think that you have to restore confidence. Senior management obviously has its problems. Have you had any meetings since the report came down, or since this 5-point action plan came out to plan the future? Have you sat down since this 5-point plan came out?
Senior management and myself since the task force report came out, although we have set one up within the next couple of weeks. I'll be meeting with Mr. Chopra to discuss this.
Donc, ça fait quand même 2 ans.
So, there has been a change in government. So we have to look at communications, transparency, provide information to you and to Canadians as well. But I'm a little bit concerned because Mr. Hubot said one thing. He said that you weren't even aware that there was a problem with the pension funds. I'm surprised to hear this because usually management and union, whether it be public or not, talk to each other and explain the status of the pension fund. We do meet twice a week. We meet twice to talk about retirements and certain little problems, but I can tell you that I've been at the national office for 7 years and no one has ever said clearly things aren't going well. Thank you.
For 5, we'll go to Mr. Robillard for Mr. 5, and we'll finish off with Mademoiselle Trudel for a 3-minute round. Please, Mr. Blaney.
Ben, pour poursuivre un peu sur la lancée de monsieur.
To going back to what Mr. Ayab was saying, how can you deal with a problem if you're not even made aware of the problem? And I go back to page 63 of the report. If important organizational change are not made, and if the costs and the finances of the pension fund is not reduced, it will be impossible for Canada Post to become sustainable in the medium and long term. That's not very pleasant when Canada Post is really in hot water. I'd like to hear more on this issue, Mr. Bois. How is it? I'm sure that the committee is going to ensure that governance structures improve and that you're part of the solution. It seems to me that the workers have to be part of the solution with respect to its future. And how do you see attrition playing a role in the current challenges of Canada Post? I'll begin with Mr. Dubois, and if I have time left over, could you please reword your question? First of all, how do you see this deficit problem? How could you be part of the solution? And with respect to your labor force, we were told that there are a lot more people leaving than was expected. So is there a transition phase that's going to be happening, a gradual transition phase that's going to be adapted to the new reality? I said, with respect to this 5-point action plan, there was some open communication with the employer on our side, but this was not done at every level, unfortunately. I'm referring to the 3 other bargaining units. The biggest one being the CUPW. I don't believe that these unions were consulted adequately. That's my personal opinion. I think that the 4 unions have to sit down. Of course, and as I said earlier, we won't agree on everything, but we have to start somewhere.
How do you see that?
Well, I think one of the bright spots of the task force report is that it actually presents a number of options to solve any pension issues without affecting the benefits of members or retirees. It puts forward several options. We'd be, of course, willing to talk about anything that moves in that direction. We don't believe that the solvency test is an effective measurement of our pension plan, and that there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is, of course, that Canada Post isn't going to be winding down anytime soon. It doesn't make sense for a government-owned entity to be covered under this same test. But at the same time, the test itself isn't reflective of our pension plan. I mean, the real-world growth of our pensions and the return on their investments is 5 times what that solvency test projects it to be for the future. So either the test can be reformed, or we could be removed from it, or another option. But we're certainly willing to talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Monsieur Paradis, avez-vous un...
Paradis, do you wish to add anything?
In terms of attrition problem, because normally the way you deal with attrition is that you have to figure out where people are leaving from, develop some form of attrition plan or some form of succession plan, and figure out basically which positions you need to staff. So if you have a high turnover or high attrition, then you need to figure out where that's coming from, what you need to have the right people in place to do those jobs. Yeah. In terms of pension specifically, the unions have taken an approach that we're looking for permanent solvency relief. And that was sent to Minister Foote, referred to Bill Morneau. And I believe that Canada Post, as an organization, took the exact same position back in 2008 during legislative review. In terms of the options provided in the document, I'd be more than willing to explore or at least consider those options as long as they don't negatively impact any members of the plan. We did raise that option as a side note with the Pension Advisory Council at Canada Post. I asked basically, will Canada Post be doing some form of analysis of the options provided by the task force in terms of how it impacts our plan. I received two responses. Response A was the task force document is new. Response B was that, well, it's not our report, right? So I still don't have a clear response from the corporation.
Sorry, Madame
You're at Monsieur Robillard, 5 minutes.
Mr. Robillard, 5 minutes.
On souhaite rendre solvable.
Ideally, we want Canada Post to be solvable. Perhaps that means changes are necessary. I want to ensure, however, that we don't forget about the safety of users. In your opinion, what measures are in place to ensure the safety, the physical safety of users, including Canada Post workers, regardless of what type of changes are made?
At Canada Post, and that covers everything from health and safety to our workforce, and we know that Canada Post has underreported their injury rates, and there's a major issue there. We're certainly aware of the challenges faced by putting community mailboxes into neighborhoods that weren't designed for them, and the risks that pose to the public. We have submissions that go into that on our home mail delivery versus community mailboxes that talks about exactly that and some of those issues, the challenges faced. And in terms of health and safety, it really is both the public and our members at risk. I had mentioned earlier the potential for increase in repetitive strain injuries, and so on. But for the public, you're now going from a place where you have one letter carrier walking to the street to now the whole public having to come to one central location to pick things up. And so we see an increase in slips, trips, and falls, and there have already been a number of serious injuries as a result of community mailboxes. That's a fact.
I have time. Okay, last question. De votre expérience,
based on your experience, what means are available to citizens to resolve problems when they come across a problem? For example, the location of a community postal box that might be dangerous. What recourse do citizens have?
Last couple of years, very little recourse, and some citizens have gone to extreme lengths, even occupying places and sitting down in lawn chairs to stop the boxes from being implemented. Of course, the city of Hamilton went to court to try and get some control over this, and that's still winding its way through the appeals process. I think it's quite clear that at least over the last couple of years, as I've rolled out the placement of mailboxes, the public consultation and the willingness to listen to complaints from within the neighborhood has been completely lacking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have about a minute and a half, Mr.
Oh,
Whelan.
wonderful. That's
Very
excellent.
generous.
Well, first, I would just like to thank all of the unions for coming to present to us today. We know it's tight on the heels of the task force report, and much of your presentations will coming to us, I guess, in a written form. And what I'd like to suggest to the room and to the committee is that, given the compressed time frame today and the votes, that we attempt to schedule another 3-hour session involving the Canada Post Corporation itself, dedicate a second hour to Canadian Union of Postal Workers, and then to make sure that we hear from the other unions on their own as well, to dedicate a third hour then to the other unions that we had here today. And I guess my question then to the unions is, if when we return from our road tour over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks, depending on what happens with our scheduling, if they'd be prepared to come back and meet us that time, but to attempt to get their written submissions in as soon as possible so that we have an opportunity to digest them, discuss those ideas presented with Canadians across the country, and then pose further questions to you on those more detailed analyses.
Absolutely.
I agree. General nodding of consent. I can take that as unanimity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Whalen. We'll certainly take that up on our steering committee. Our final intervention will be 3 minutes from Mademoiselle Tudel. Please.
Merci. Yesterday, the task force, when we met with them, said that they looked at the financial means of Canada Post based on 2011. That's when pay equity was brought in as well. I'd like to get your opinion. Do you find that it's fair to base its data on the year 2011?
On the pattern of deception and misinformation from Canada Post on its finances over the last several years, you see one of the issues is that Canada Post often glazes over substantial one-time issues that cause it to lose money, and then also doesn't, they like they like to run around like Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. The truth of the matter is, in 2011, they had to settle a major lawsuit, a pay equity suit that stretched back almost 3 decades. And they also locked out their workers that year. So I was not surprised that they lost money in 2011, although the vast majority of it is from the pay equity case.
I just want. Presently, the Canadian Postmasters, our union, has an outstanding pay equity complaint from 1993, and we have just had a decision from the federal court that we could move forward and take it to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. So I'm hoping that our pay equity complaint will be resolved in the very near future.
Final comments, anyone? Well, thank you very much. Colleagues, on your behalf, I would like to thank all of our witnesses here today. And I'll choose my words carefully here. I appreciate the fact that you have given a different perspective from some of the testimony that we've heard earlier. And coming from a family where I have, as one of my brother-in-laws, a letter carrier in the family, I know he would appreciate your comments here as well. As you know, we are going, as Mr. Whalen said, we will be going on the road starting next week. We will have consultations in Eastern Atlantic, Eastern Canada, Central Canada, and Western Canada. You had mentioned, Mr. Palasek, that many of your representatives will be appearing before us. We look forward to that. We look forward to your submissions as well. And this committee is charged with the responsibility of developing a report and presenting it and tabling it in Parliament before the end of this year. So we look forward to further dialogue and further discussions with you as we approach that deadline. Thank you once again. We are adjourned.
you